Welcome to Creation in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Carl Ball, founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. We have a program for you today that I think you will never forget. We're going to walk right into your home with a marvelous, incredible display of meteorites and the explanation from the Torah, the biblical record, and orienting those to our current situation in prophecy and anticipation of the future. Now, we're titling this program Mountains from the Sky because we're speaking about planetesimals. We're speaking about asteroids and comets and meteors, and especially meteorites, which are the fragments from larger meteors. And I have a very special guest that I'll introduce in just a moment. Mountains from the skies. For those of you who recognize the impact of the biblical record anticipating the book of Revelation and the prophecy of the future, there will come a time when a huge mountain from the sky will fall in to the earth, and the impact in the ocean will inundate coastal lands worldwide. That will be an incredibly large planetesimal. Now, to show you how large some have been in the past, we have fragments of this one to show you later today in the program. But to give you an idea as to the size of the crater left by some of the impacts from time to time, in Arizona, as my guest will show briefly, in Arizona we have a crater impact that's approximately 1.5 miles wide, and most of the meteorite is still buried, even though many of the fragments have already been discerned. Now, to give you an idea as to what a meteorite would be, a sizable meteorite would be in relation to a human being, here is one whose fragment we have with us today and will be explained by our scholar in a moment. Here's one which shows you a relative size. That's a fragment much like the one Professor Zimmerman is going to show us shortly. So that gives you a size reference of the original bodies and gives you a reference to the fragments. We're going to actually examine some of these, and in order to set the stage, I've invited again Professor Gary Zimmerman to be my special guest. Gary, it is always a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be with you today.
Some of the guests to the program, viewers of the program, will remember that you're the scholar who spent a decade and with the funding of a small foundation, spent over $400,000 in the process, accumulating all 39 books of the Old Testament in one place. Is that right?
Yes, the 39 books of the Old Testament in Hebrew scroll form would be in 16 scrolls.
Yes.
And we're going to put these 16 scrolls on display at the Creation Evidence Museum.
You shocked me live on the program some months ago when you made that global announcement, and I'm still in ecstasy over that. People will come from around the world to see that, and by the time this program airs, those scrolls should be on display at the museum with the full security.
Yes.
Well, again, my gratitude to you and the long decades we've had in association and bonding in the blood of Jesus Christ.
Thank you. It is a privilege to be here today. I brought a set of meteorites I use when I teach Bible prophecy. Revelation chapter 8 does talk about something like a great mountain coming from the sky.
Yes.
And the scientific community today, they're so concerned with asteroids or comets, near-miss asteroids of the Earth. The scientific community now, they're calling the asteroids, great mountains.
Yes, yes. And here we have fragments of some of these mountains. Yes. The asteroids would be, of course, the larger context of space bodies. And then we have the meteors and the meteorites and so forth. In fact, for the audience, here we have a simulation or perhaps an actual photograph, because there have been comets, all in the general planetesimal classification, but comets, most of those are dust and ice, but then we have these great mountains out in space, yes. Asteroids, and then meteors a little smaller and meteorites a little smaller yet, or fragments of the meteors. So here we have an enactment of the space odyssey transpiring. Now we have Io, this moon, which shows impact craters and volcanic activity, much of that volcanic activity having to do with the energy released from the meteoritic display. And even on Venus, with all its canals, whatever the canals may be, and that is still up for academic justification or verification, with all the canals, we have large, huge crater impacts. Now, you have brought to the studio this chart, and while people are focusing in, while the viewers are focusing in on this, I was certainly intrigued with the drama of this individual whose car was impacted in the right rear bumper area by a meteorite. He's holding the meteorite, and that shows the velocity and the weight involved and the destruction impact.
Yes, this chart was put out by Aerolite meteorite collectors in Arizona, and it's an A to Z listing of each of the meteorites according to the alphabet. And we brought several of these with us today, like the Signoraggio meteorite.
Oh, very special, very valuable.
Yes. And then we brought portions of the Canyon Diablo meteorite with us, and several pieces of the Campo de Cielo. That would be, where is this Campo de Cielo? It's up there in that area?
Yes. And it, of course, is a very important a meteorite. And what I want to bring out while we're looking at this chart momentarily is the statement here that we actually have a few meteorites having struck planet Earth that are called chondrites, and they are from reflective blows from the lunar surface, from the moon surface, or Mars surface, throwing them into an orbit that would ultimately land them on planet Earth. And we know those that came from the moon because they're little flecks and sometimes larger chunks of anorthosite. That is the reflective material of the moon. So some of these meteorites have a combination of anorthite, a meteoritic material, which is, as you know, iron and nickel, basically, with other substances, sometimes silica, etc. And in this process, you can have a strike that would be at the trajectory of a glancing blow, and it would kick some of the material up, or glance the meteorite itself up into orbit. Now, before we get to the heart and center of this, I'd like for the audience to see what we have brought for the display to show that some of these meteorites were huge meteors, huge impact craters. But I want the audience to know that while these are normally assigned long ages in the evolutionary scenario, Professor Zimmerman, what we actually see is a flow that is recent and covered many of the impact craters with the lava material from internal disruption. Here we have a recent crater. Here we have a crater that was filled with the flow of this material, and that is the flow direction. In addition to that, here we have the impact of the moon, and it is pockmarked with all of these craters. And in the biblical record, we have a marvelous display of the causative factor of this. Professor Zimmerman has brought to the studio today a prized possession, the Torah.